Welcome to another episode of FPTV. I'm Blake Hounshell, Managing Editor of Foreign Policy. We're here at the Global Thinkers Gala 2011. I'm here with David Beers of Standard & Poor's, who is arguably the man single-handedly most responsible for ruining the economy this year. I'm kidding. Let me ask you this. Why did Standard & Poor's downgrade the United States?
Because, for two reasons. One is, and by the way, this was expressed very well by our own Secretary of the Treasury, Mr. Geithner, because he said there were two issues last August when the debt ceiling issue was resolved. One was that that whole debate had done harm to the standing of the United States internationally about whether the United States was going to default on its debt or not. And secondly, he said that the public finances of the United States remained, even with that agreement, on an unsustainable path. And those two factors together were the reasons why we lowered the rating.
Now, do you feel vindicated by how the politics played out after the ratings downgrade? There was the debate over the debt ceiling and that debacle, and then we've had the super committee, which has been not very super.
No, it hasn't been very super, and it does, epitomize what we were talking about back in August, which is this deep divide in the country about, fiscal policy choices. And so our view was then, and remains today, that there is no consensus in the U.S. today about how to get on top of the deficit problem, which is why there's still a deficit problem, and we think it will persist, and it could very well persist after the next elections next year.
Now, if you look at the 10-year Treasury bonds, I think they're still around 2%. Mm-hmm. I mean, doesn't that signal that everything's fine? We should actually borrow more money? We could probably make money by borrowing money.
If that were true, then, well, one of the points that I've been making is that we need to, by now, after going through the whole global credit crisis, the Eurozone crisis that's playing out now, we need to, we would have thought that the idea that current financial market indicators were an erring predictor of credit risk, you would have thought had been discredited by events, because, until 2 years ago, in the Eurozone, Greece was thought to be as creditworthy as Germany.
Happy days.
By the standards,
those were happy days.
By the standards of the bond market. So if you think that all the fundamental problems in Greece have just appeared miraculously and suddenly over the last 2 years, that would be a mistake. And Japan, which is a credit rating that we, started downgrading a decade ago, continues on the slow path of fiscal deterioration, and they're paying lower rates than the United States, 1% on their 10-year bond issues. Does that make them creditworthy? No. So I think, we have always taken the view of fundamental credit analysis, which is a long-term view, and and that's a view that looks through the current financial market dynamics. So that's true for the Eurozone, it's true for Japan, and I think it's also true for the United States. Because ultimately, all we know from experience is, in ways that are difficult to predict, markets suddenly wake up and the dynamics suddenly shift. And that was certainly true in the Eurozone, and we suspect in time it will also be true for Japan and for the United States also.
Now, my last question is about economists. Mm-hmm. When you think about the economists who have the most to say about our current situation, dead or alive, who do you listen to?
Well, I will define economists broadly. And one of the thinkers, which hopefully one day will appear on your list, is a guy who writes about economic matters every day for the Financial Times, Martin Wolf, who's their economics guru. And he's a guy who's very smart and thinks deeply about global financial and economic matters. And I have to say that these days, if you read his columns in the FT, he mainly has...
His hair's on fire.
His hair's on fire, and he's pessimistic about a lot of things because, you know, one of the things that we think a lot about is the whole demographic dynamic that's moving with various degrees of intensity across a lot of developed countries, you know, North America, Europe, Japan, and even China. The aging story.
Inverted pyramids.
Yes, and we've constructed a very complex and very expensive fiscal edifice around, you know, fiscally around society. And anyway, I like Martin Wolf because he kind of cuts to the quick about these issues. But the point I would make is that regardless about how we get through the current credit crisis, there's a much larger crisis looming because of state-funded pensions, and even more importantly, state-funded health care. These are even bigger fiscal issues that lie ahead, and that's true in this country, it's true in Europe, it's true in Japan, and actually in a number of developing and emerging market countries as well, which are going to test the capacity of policymakers in many countries over the next decade and beyond, capacity to explain to their electorates about some very big choices that lie ahead. And I think on that whole issue, the fate of the global economy is going to turn over the next decade and beyond.
We'll end on that sunny thought. Thanks very much.
Thank you.